John Herschel Glenn Jr. was born on July 18, 1921, in the small town of Cambridge, Ohio.
I think a small town like that's almost idyllic for kids growing up, because you have free reign of the town. We knew everybody in town, and my parents knew all the rest of the people, and I knew every kid in town. And they didn't, the doors weren't locked most of the times and things like that. And so I think you grow up with an independent feeling that does well for you later in life. Gives you a confidence in your own ability to do things, and kids start out quite early.
The idea of planes, airplanes, when did that become such a...
Oh, it became of interest to me back, the earliest I remember is my dad. We were driving by a little airfield in Cambridge, Ohio, which is where I was born, and I was about 8 years old. And there was a fellow taking people up in an old open cockpit airplane. And so my dad thought that was a good idea and asked if I wanted to go up, and I did. And so he and I were in the back open cockpit with one strap across both of us, and looking down from up there, and that 15-minute flight a couple of times around town and back, that hooked me. I went home and started building model airplanes, and the old balsa ones that you cut out, you cut out the pieces for it. You didn't just snap them together like the kids do
exactly
now.
Right. With the glue.
Yeah, with all the glue, and then you put tissue paper on, and you shrunk it and everything. And I guess that's what started me out. And then from then on, I never, I aspired to be a pilot sometime, but never thought that was possible. Then when I was in college, they had a program, civilian pilot training. The government would pay for your taking flight lessons. You get your private pilot's license, and you got physics credit for it in college. Yeah. And that was too good to miss. And so I started, I took that and had my private license. And then the next December is when December 7th was Pearl Harbor. And then I dropped out in the middle of my junior year out of college and volunteered to go into military flight training, and then spent 23 years in the Marine Corps.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket.
The space race had begun.
Is it hard being a national hero?
I don't look at myself like that.
Oh, come on.
I don't, Charlie.
Come on. I can name five people on any list of 5 American heroes, you're there.
Well, that's up to other people, not up to me.
But I watched you walk in. We walked into this building together. I mean, you are aware that people know it's John Glenn, and so you therefore do what someone who's recognized would do, which is say hello, because you know.
Well, I'm aware of that, and we get a lot of attention. It's just like walking in this morning. The people down there recognize me, and we walk in, and they look and smile and stick out their hand and want to meet, and I'm happy to meet people like that. Yeah. That's fine. But do I get up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, "Hello there, hero. Here's how I'm going to act today"? Oh,
and when you go to bed at night, you don't say to Annie, "Move over, let the national hero."
Put the hero in. Far from that. No, we just try and act every day like we always have, and I think
it does put a responsibility on you.
Well, I don't doubt that a bit, and I think when people want you to talk to their kids or something like that, I remember that talking to certain people had on my own life when I was a kid, and I remember to this day. And we all are a product of being helped by certain people, by certain teachers in particular. And I think if I can encourage other people into encourage their kids into something that they want to do, as I was encouraged when I was a kid, then that's great. And if people recognize me and I can use it for that purpose, well, I think that's fine.
Are you born with courage, or can you acquire it through training?
Oh, I think courage is almost all acquired through training, would be my view of it. You're born with a certain amount of courage, and I think as you grow up in a small town, you get a lot of confidence in your own ability because of all the different things you do. And that's part of it. But I think the best way to avoid being afraid, the best way to have courage to do something, is to train and train and train.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
Presidential motorcade had just passed through heavy crowds in downtown.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
President Kennedy was a very impressive person. I remember the first time, I had met him But then he had asked me to come and brief him at the White House before my mission back then on Friendship 7. And I went in, and this was a couple of months before the flight, and I went in, and I was prepared. I didn't think the president would be interested in a lot of real detail. And so I described in general terms what was going to happen, and he kept asking more detailed questions about how we did this, and how we're going to control it, and what the thrusters did, and all that stuff. And I finally said, Mr. President, you know, if you want me to really brief in detail, I'd be glad to get some material and come back, and maybe we could do this again. And he thought that was great. He thought it was good. So I came back the next time. We covered up half the table in the cabinet room with models and diagrams and pictures and the instrument panel, mock-up of the instrument panel.
Why did you decide to get into politics?
My interest in politics came not just as an opportunity later on, but it started way back when I was in high school. We mentioned teachers. Yes. I had two teachers that were particularly influential in my young life, in addition to my parents, of course. One was a man named Ellis Deitch, who is in his 90s now and is still living back in New Concord, and he was my physics teacher in high school and really whetted my interest in science. Another one was a man named Harford Steele, and he taught a course called Civics, which was government and politics. And he just made it come alive, man. You just could almost see the things happening in history when he taught them. And from that time, and you know, it was a very, patriotism was that was the norm in New Concord when I was growing up. It wasn't something that you had to be taught or anything. It was a norm. And he taught this. And then later, all the time I was in the Marine Corps then, as a result of his teaching, I always had an interest in government and politics. And I always had a book on government and politics with me, and I did a lot of reading in that area. And so, but to be in politics was an aspiration. That was something that you aspired to when I was a kid growing up. And so later when I had a chance to run, well, I decided I would try that.
What's the thing you're most proud of, other than Annie?
No, Annie would have to fit number one. That was my smartest move.
But I'm taking beyond that, obviously. That's
I don't think there'd be any one. You take each thing as it comes along. I was very proud of being a good fighter pilot and take my place in war and things like that, representing this country. Was very proud. Opportunities came along later then for doing military test work, and I was proud of some of the work on airplanes. And in the Senate, some of the things we did there that hadn't been done before, I'm very proud of some of those things. So each thing fits in a different category and by itself.
But that first orbital flight wouldn't be it?
Oh, the orbital flight would have to rank very high, obviously.
I mean, what can be possibly higher than the first orbital flight?
That would rank very high, I must admit.
And what do you regret the most? What has disappointed you the most?
Oh, probably that failed run for the presidency. I guess that was a big disappointment, major.
What does John Glenn have to say to us about aging?
I would hope that people would think that if they're capable of doing something and they want to do it. And don't get into this.
Want to go in space? Just do it.
Don't get into this artificial business of because you've hit 62 or 65 or whatever.
Some that magical time.
That you're supposed to be some sort of couch potato. I was interviewed on a program, Charlie, probably a year ago now, or a little over that, about a year and a half ago. And they were asking about my going back into space, and wasn't I too old? And I said, I made something like the following statement. I said, look, everybody's got to realize that old folks have just as many hopes and dreams and ambitions as anybody else. And if you can, and why should you stifle them? Yeah. If you're capable of it and you're physically able to do these things, why not go for it?
Godspeed, John Glenn. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway. You're loud and clear. Roger, we're programming and roll okay. A little bumpy along about here. 2, 1, mark. Roger, backup clock is started. All systems are go. Seco. Lots of grades fired. Okay.